for people who may not be paying attention, first of all, you should be. I think you're missing out if you're not. We've been running this Watch Madness tournament. So it's a March Madness style bracket tournament of Talking Watches episodes. Every day people can come to the site, they can vote, and then the next round comes. So this whole thing has had me thinking about how we all have our own favorite Talking Watches and our own favorite Talking Watches moments, not even whole episodes. So, you're relatively fresh to the team, but I know you're a longtime HODINKEE reader, a longtime fan. So I wanted to sit down and talk about your favorite Talking Watches moments. Coming to this with a little bit of outside perspective, because I think some of us, we know all the behind the scenes stuff. We've met a lot of these folks. We've been a part of producing them. So, speaking personally, a lot of my favorite moments are tied to videos that I was a part of where, even if I wasn't the person on screen, I was there, I was talking to the collector, I got to see the watches. But I wanted to see with some distance and some perspective, what your favorite moments are. And I know you prepared a couple to chat about today, right?
For sure. I put together a short list of what I think are sort of some, not B-sides, but some of the lesser known, I would say, Talking Watches episodes that I personally, as a fan, connected to before joining HODINKEE.
Sweet.
And yeah, so I think it's a great sort of collection of, whether it be funny moments or some pretty deeply personal moments.
What do you have queued up for us first here?
So first one that I have queued up is actually the episode with Alton Brown. And sort of segging away from my first watch story where I was writing about a watch that belonged to my grandfather and my father. When I saw this episode, this is him talking about a watch that was very important to him that actually belonged to his father.
Next to this is a early 70s Omega Chronostop. My father was wearing this watch when he died in 1973. And my mom waited a couple of years and gave me the watch. In college, one day my apartment was broken into and my apartment was looted and the watch was stolen.
Wow.
Then, about 10 years ago, I found the exact watch on eBay.
The actual watch?
The actual watch. All the numbers matched. The movement numbers matched. It was beat to crap, but the feeling when I was online and it was had my records, I'm reading the numbers and I'm looking at photos and I realized this was actually my dad's watch.
That's incredible.
I was kind of overcome and I paid way too much.
Yeah, I just love that moment. That moment is so special to me. And I think I've talked about this before, but I wasn't in the office when we recorded with Alton Brown, and I'm a big Alton Brown fan. And when I finally got to see the tape, it was just this it's almost like a gut punch, but in a good way, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, I wasn't there either, but watching the video, I think, I don't know how much, story prep goes into filming the pieces, but it seemed that Ben genuinely was sort of shocked at sort of what Alton really went through in the fact that, monitoring eBay notifications and sort of finding out that you found the exact watch. And I think you get lucky, especially with Omega, too, that they keep such meticulous records on their references because you're able to actually figure out, not only is this the same reference, this is the watch. This was the watch. And, it meant so much to him to actually, put it back together again.
Yeah. That's an interesting point. I've never thought about that before, but that's an interesting use of a company archive, right? Is the records aren't just for, I go online and buy some watch and I want to know exactly where it's from, but it's if you're trying to connect the dots, if you're trying to solve a mystery, solve a puzzle here, or verify that something is this really critical, important thing to you, those archives become really, really important.
Yeah, absolutely. So up next, a little bit lighter of a topic. It's actually Gary Steingart. It is it's a pretty funny moment where he is talking about a specific Longa watch.
So the next Glasuta watch that I dove into was, of course, the Longa. You kind of get into this world inch by inch and you're like, I will never do this.
Right.
But then you do it and then it's on your wrist. I never thought that the word engraved balance cock would mean so much to me, those words, but those are three beautiful words. I mean, when you look at this case back, it's insane. I think in one of your articles you mentioned that it looks like a pocket watch. If you just blew it up a little bit, you could have a beautiful pocket watch. And that is an exciting thing to wear in a watch this thin.
Yeah, Gary's amazing. I could listen to Gary talk about watches all day. And quick aside here is the second half of this episode is going to be a conversation with Gary. So people get to hear more from him in a little bit if they keep listening. But yeah, his episode of Talking Watches is so infused with his personality, which I think is one of the things that makes the series special.
For sure. And for me, as someone who, doesn't try to take myself too seriously, when it comes to this sort of thing, I'm definitely, I'm very passionate about it, but you sort of get the sense that there's some, phraseology, terminology in this world that if you don't take yourself too seriously, you can have some fun with it. And him sort of playing around and sort of at the same time geeking out, which is what we all want to do. We all want to sort of show off that we've learned a new thing or a new phrase, but also the tongue-in-cheek aspect of it is just something that was, entirely relatable to me.
Yeah, I agree. I think Gary does a great job of balancing that sort of like high and low, that like deep nerdiness with that also like sort of sense of self-parody a little bit. And I think that's an important thing, with watches. I think we've all been in those watch conversations with somebody where it's like, all right, like pump the brakes a little bit, like I love this stuff, in your case, in my case, like we do this for a living,
right?
It is literally how we put food on the table. But at the same time, like they're just watches. Like let's not get carried away here.
Right. And we love them. And it takes nothing away from that. It's just
for
sort
sure.
of, it's just have some fun with it at the same time. And I think that you can tell by his collection that he is doing that. Despite there's a huge variance in the value of the watches that he has. And it just shows, how much that he really does sort of love the hobby.
Yeah. You have another Gary moment for us though too, right?
I do. It's actually a Gary moment that involves you. So
oh boy, no good can come of this.
It's funny because I think he says in the video something about buying a watch after the product of having some drinks with the one and only SJP.
Yeah, that happens.
We were out recently with Stephen J. Pulverin,
Yes.
managing editor of HODINKEE, and as the night progressed, I had a few more gimlets with Stephen.
Yes.
And this is where he really opened up and told me that I should look out for a certain watch that was coming down the pike. And it really surprised me what it was. It was a Rolex OP with a white dial. It's a Zelig watch. It really captures whatever's around it. I had an Instagram photo of myself wearing it in this brightly lit Miami ice cream shop, and people wrote in and said, wow, you bought a salmon dial. That's so awesome. And it's obviously not, but it just kind of adjusts to almost any environment it wants, and it just sucks up the beauty of wherever it is.
So in this clip, I was watching it just because, that OP39, you wrote that article on the OP39 in white, and I think it was the OP34 in black. And
yes.
That was sort of a little known release at the time. I think that those two color variants had actually were released, and people hadn't really, there wasn't a lot of, press around it. I'm not exactly sure which watches were released that particular year that overshadowed them. But once that article came out, I remember thinking to myself that you pretty much set the watch internet aflame. And I think it shows, with Gary sort of talking about it, that it is sort of that one watch, all you need sort of get out of collecting. All you need is this one OP39 in white. And the way that the video sort of encapsulates the sort of mystique surrounding it, it really sort of shows it as this sort of magical watch. And the only reason that I'm sort of mentioning this is because I wanted it when I saw the video. I still want it. And so it warranted a reference on H Radio.
I'll admit, like, I still want that watch. I know Gary's bought one. A few mutual friends of ours have bought them. Actually, like 2 or 3 people. Davey, who we work with, has one. Every time I see that watch in the metal, I just can't get past how damn good it is. It's like Rolex makes a good watch, and people can naysay it all they want, and people can focus on the stuff that has years long wait lists, the Daytonas, the GMTs, whatever. But like when Rolex does something basic, they do it right, and they do it really, really, really well.
Yeah, that white dial, which is sort of an off-white, and it's sort of even textured a little bit. It's just when you see it in the metal and you're holding it in your hand, it just gives you a whole nother aspect to that watch. Agreed. And it solidifies what makes that watch so great. Should we do like a little group buy? A couple of us all get them? Get some engravings on the back? Count me in. All right, multiple engravings. Yeah, just tons of engravings. Just totally fill the back. Like yearbook signatures.
I love that. Let's do it.
Good. Perfect.
Next up, you've got kind of a classic, like, big talking watches flex, which is something that over the years we've seen happen a number of times where somebody just like pulls out a watch that half the audience, or in some cases all of the audience, doesn't even know exists, and kind of just like drops a bomb on everybody all at once.
Yeah, this one is from the second John Mayer talking watches. So
okay.
This is a moment that John is showing Ben and the watch world something pretty special.
This is new for me on talking watches because I'm showing a piece unique that was made for me by Patek. And this was made 2012. This is a salmon dial 5004 with my name engraved on the back.
At the factory.
At the factory.
Yeah.
I decided to go with Mr. J.C. Mayer. I felt that was very much in the Patek style. It's also, again, I am not Mr. J.C. Mayer, but in the fantasy of the man I am when I wear these watches, I am Mr. J.C. Mayer. Nowhere else in my life am I Mr. J.C. Mayer. And the most interesting part about the watch is that I requested luminous hands. And I said, I would like to be able to see the watch on stage in the dark. I'd like to be able to read the time in the dark. And
Which is completely reasonable.
It's completely reasonable, and they agreed to it. And so I believe I have the only 5004 with luminous hands.
Yeah. And how many times have you worn that on stage?
Yeah, 0 times.
Yeah, man, that watch blew my mind. I was fortunate enough to get to be at the taping of that, which Gray, our producer here, was also a part of that shoot. Just the volume of really special watches present was crazy. You usually get like quantity or quality, and in this case, you got a quantity of quality.
Right. I think too in that video, and this is a totally different set of watches he was talking about, but when he was actually on the subject of the gold Daytonas, the more modern Daytonas, it's not often that you see collectors or celebrities or guests on talking watches sort of go into the what if we can spot what is special now for the future. We're always looking back. Hindsight's 20/20. Of course, we recognize now what's collectible. The best case, the best example of that would be a Paul Newman Daytona, a watch that was not considered to be anything special at the time of its release. In fact, it wouldn't sell at the time of its release.
Right.
And it's arguably the most collectible watch, for mass, consumption, for lay people who don't really even know that much about watches, know the Paul Newman Daytona. Sure. And for John to be speaking on what if we can identify those watches now and sort of show that is just that was something that was also really cool to see.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that was one really fascinating aspect. And then, to not quite let this unique salmon dial go. The idea of piece unique watches is still so special. And it's something that I've always found really fascinating. I came to the watch world from the men's clothing world. And in the clothing world, like once you get to a certain level, it's all custom. Like nothing is ready made. Like whether it's suits, shoes, jeans, like whatever. Once you get to a certain level, you're not buying off the rack. You're getting exactly what you want, and it's like co-designed by you and a craftsman and whatever. In watches, that's still relatively uncommon, even at the highest levels. And when you occasionally do get to see that and experience it, I sort of get these like, chill moments where I'm just like, ooh, like that's really amazing and really special. And it's something I wonder if we're going to see more of kind of over the next, 10, 15 years, if that becomes more a part of watch culture.
I wouldn't be surprised if that happens, in part because of John. I mean, I think he's so influential in that world. Yeah. And I also connected, he's such a mega celebrity in his own right. But the part with that piece unique where he engraved the back of the watch J.C. Mayer and describes doing that, saying, I'm not J.C. Mayer. That's not who I am, but that's who I envision myself to be in that world. And just sort of having that fantasy. We all fantasize about, different versions of ourselves, whether we're wearing different watches to sort of exemplify that fantasy. But to see that even someone like John Mayer does the same thing and is doing it through something that he's so passionate about was really something that I connected to as well. And not just that, but also the sort of tongue-in-cheek where he's saying, walking around Hollywood and looking at fellow celebrities, and they're saying, "What are you wearing?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm just rocking that piece unique stuff." Come on, like I'm sure people do say that. I'm sure people do that, you know, in Hollywood, and I'm sure that, you know, it's funny that he can at least poke fun at it.
Yeah, for sure. I also like in terms of the sense of humor when he talks about really pushing to get the loomed hands on that watch,
right?
And how it's so that I can read it on stage. And then Ben's like, "Oh, so do you wear it on stage?" And he's like, "No, absolutely not."
Of course.
It's again, it's about like these watches are partially about how we see ourselves. Like, you know, even on a basic level, I'll talk about myself. Like, you know, I'm wearing our collaboration IWC Pilot today on a
great watch,
beat up NATO strap. Like, I don't need a Seratanium watch on a NATO strap that's like, you know, super legible and meant for flying an airplane. Like, I mean, right now, like the most travel I'm doing is from one side of my apartment to the other. But like, even on a good day, like I'm sitting in economy plus drinking a Diet Coke. Like I'm not out there adventuring, you know. It's not.
If I could count the times I've said to my wife, "No, but honey, this can go, you know, 3,000 feet under the water," and she looks at me, When have you ever done that? When have you ever gone deeper than 6 feet underwater?
Right.
And I think to myself, but it can do it.
Yeah, and these things help us craft our visions of who we are. And I agree with you in this video with John. It's really nice to see that, you know, from the brand new watch collector who's buying a G-Shock or a Seiko 5 up to like John who's ordering Piece Unique Patek's, like that same dream is still there and that same appeal is still there. It's kind of like the universal language of watch collecting.
For sure.
So let's go to another funny moment that you've got queued up for us here.
So this is a little bit of a throwback. I think this is a fairly, you know, ways back. I'm talking watches lore.
Early-ish.
Sure. This is Spike Ferriston, and I just think this is sort of similar to what I was talking about with Gary, just sort of showing off what you know, but also, you know, keeping it light and keeping it funny.
Have the Octavia here in different colors. You know, new old stock condition. Core fam strap. I love these words. Core fam.
Yeah.
Creamy looms. That's another phrase I really like. And you know, one of my favorite watches, my buddies who I drive with, we all have them and we all like to put them on and be idiots.
Yeah, man, Spike is hilarious. Like he is such a funny, charismatic dude. It is abundantly clear when you meet him why he is who he is.
Oh, for sure. And you can see in his background. I think he wrote for Seinfeld. He wrote for Letterman. I mean, these are heavy hitting shows in two different segments. You have sitcom, late night, and his sensibility is so on, and his timing is so on. But he's at the same time, you can tell by his collection that he's very knowledgeable. You know, has a very diverse collection of watches. But you know, he's also a scholar in a sense. He's learning. He's educating himself. But he's also sort of putting that on display in only a way that a comedian and a writer of his caliber would, and I thought that was great.
Yeah, totally agree. Let's go to the next one too. This is a really fun one. It's not necessarily funny or tongue in cheek, but it's just like it's another example of how watches are ultimately about having fun.
Yeah, this one from Keegan Allen. The best bad pun I could come up with is this watch is a pretty little lie.
Ooh, I like that.
So we see a bunch of Rolexes and then something that looks like a Rolex but is not a Rolex.
Yes, it's a Gabriel Tribeca, and it's an early serial number. It's an 18 out of 500, and it's a Panda, and it is not a Paul Newman Daytona. But the beauty of it is that I can feel like I'm wearing a $250,000 watch.
You can.
Without worrying about wearing a $250,000 watch. Now, is that in essence paying homage to it? Maybe. Is that in essence completely the opposite of what you should be doing as a watch collector? Maybe. But I enjoy it so much because, as I believe I've read somewhere in the depths of HODINKEE, it is the ultimate curiosity piece. But the construction of this watch, I mean, all kidding aside, the construction of this watch is beautiful.
It's kind of amazing, actually.
It's just incredible. I realized when I bought this, I was like, that's it. I'm deep into it now. If I'm buying an homage piece to a Daytona, a Paul Newman Daytona, and only people that know what it is know what it is.
Right.
And I've had people beeline it to me across a grocery store. I was at Whole Foods once wearing this, and someone shot across the aisle and they went, "Is that a Paul Newman Daytona?" And they couldn't even tell from here. And I was like, could be, but no.
Yeah, this is a hot topic amongst watch collectors. You know, homage watches are something that if you go into the deep, dark recesses of the watch internet, you'll find some pretty vitriolic things written about them. But like in this case, this watch is fun. Like, it puts a smile on his face, and that to me is a good thing.
Yeah, I think he was, talking about you can wear, a 6-figure watch without feeling like you're wearing a 6-figure watch on your wrist.
Yeah.
And you can actually see in the video, he really enjoys that watch. He really, really likes it. He appreciates it for what it is. It gives him happiness to wear it. And to me, at the time, going back to being a fan before I worked, at HODINKEE, it was sort of a passive permission, from a known collector, from a celebrity that says you can wear an homage piece. There's nothing that said, there's no rule book that says to you, you can't wear this. If it makes you happy, wear it. And it comes up all the time. We get asked pretty often, should I buy this or should I buy that? What do you think of this versus this? And it really comes down to, this is a pure example of, there's nobody telling him what he can and cannot wear. And him sort of having this sort of, platform of influence in some ways. It says to, the fan out there like myself at the time, if you love it, wear it.
Yeah. I also give Keegan major props for putting this watch in his episode. I think he's a longtime reader. He's really involved in the community. You'll see him in the comments occasionally. Like, he's familiar with what was going to happen. Like, he didn't go into this blindly.
Right.
And I give Keegan major props for kind of inviting this tsunami of, for lack of a better word, shit to be thrown at him, and being there and saying, like, I'm gonna defend this. Like, I'm not ashamed of this at all.
Yeah,
I
lean in hard on that one.
decision.
Sure.
Yeah.
I would have loved to have seen someone running at him in a Whole Foods. Just, is that a Paul Newman Daytona? What is that?
You never know what happens in West Hollywood, man.
You know what happens in Soho, but not West Hollywood. Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, we got one more for people, and I know we're running a little long here, but we can't not include this.
This one for me was great. This is the episode that Jack interviewed Roger Smith, and for me, the watch that he talks about is just it was so wild to see, but also at the end of the day, when I think about it, just so appropriate.
And of course, your everyday watch, which I think many viewers are going to be quite pleased to see.
My wife bought me this for my 40th. It was actually a second-hand piece when I got it. I think it's about 13 years old now, 14 years old now. I always liked Rolex.
Do you feel that Rolex deserves the respect that some of us have for it in terms of the quality of manufacturing of the engine itself?
Yeah, without a doubt. What I see as an asset is that they have never really changed their movements. They've upgraded them. Mm-hmm. I think you'll know probably more than me that the mechanism in this is probably about 30 odd years old. Mm-hmm. And why change a good thing? Why reinvent it? Yeah. People used to say to me with the Series 2, oh, when are you going to stop it? When are you going to make a new movement? And I always used to say, and still say to this day, well, I designed what I consider to be a good movement. And they've got a great watch, a great product, and I wear this watch every day. If I'm going for dinner, wear it at work, wear it in the garden, fixing the car. It's a great all-rounder.
Yeah, I mean, before we get into the specifics of this clip, can we just agree that, like, Roger's the man? Roger's the absolute best.
Completely. And it was just totally solidified, like, in that clip.
Perfect. As long as we agree there, the rest of this is easy.
Totally.
Yeah, I mean, I say this as a guy who already owns an Explorer, an older one than that one, but this made me want to buy the exact one that Roger had,
right. And that is what, that watch, not to call any watch a basic version of a watch, but it's your most basic Rolex Explorer 36 millimeter. I think he said it was from around 1990, or maybe the year 2000, 1998, 2000 range. And it's just something that he says he wears all the time. He, gives Rolex credit where credit is due for how well the watches are built, what they can handle, what they can take. And this is somebody who, on a daily basis, has a loop in his eye working on the most, intricate watch movements possible. And for him to have such reverence for Rolex, it just gives that particular watch, which I think is sort of the watch that most people think of as the most under-the-radar version of a Rolex watch.
Yeah.
It gives it such street cred when it already has street cred in spades, honestly. And it was just so cool. Again, that's so similar to the Keegan Allen, post where it could give someone that's sort of a higher echelon of watch collecting that kind of passive permission of, that's okay to do too. I don't have to do, what everyone is saying I should do. It's okay. If I love it, I can wear it.
Yeah. First off, I love the idea that somebody needs like permission to be like, okay, wearing a Rolex, which is funny, but you're right.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Roger is arguably one of the best, probably 2 to 3 watchmakers on the planet. He's certainly top 5. And the fact that he spends all day making watches that really border on art, they kind of transcend the idea of craft and become art. Yet the thing he's wearing every day is like a, relatively mass-produced, kind of industrially produced, sort of austere steel watch, is brilliant. And I think it says everything you need to know about Roger as well, that like he is the least pretentious human being I think I've ever met, certainly in the watch industry. And the fact that he loves watches so much and in such a diverse way that like while he's making these watches in precious metals, completely handmade, not just hand finished, but like everything is handmade in a really artistic way, he can also appreciate a good, solid, technically sound watch that's available at a price where like he can afford it. Like, his watches don't come cheap. And just because he's the one making them and his team is making them doesn't mean he can just like pull one out of the production line and throw it on his wrist and keep it. Like he's got a business to run. So I think it shows his sort of like his practical approach to completely impractical things, which I think is one of the things that makes Roger so unique and so special.
And it doesn't get any more practical than that watch. I mean, that Rolex Explorer is as practical as it gets in any reference, but specifically, that which was probably produced in an exorbitant amount of, quantity. And it's just an amazing watch.
Yeah. Well, cool, man. This has been awesome. And before we wrap up, I just want to ask, like, what is it ultimately that ties these moments together for you? Like, what to you is the core of talking watches that makes it such a special thing for you?
I think it's seeing that no matter what anyone does, because all talking watches are not just celebrity interviews. For example, Roger Smith is for sure a celebrity in the watch world, but in the world at large, wouldn't be considered a celebrity. He's a master of his craft. And it just goes to show you that we are all passionate about this in different ways. And this also goes back to the story that I wrote this week, and I've gotten a ton of amazing feedback from the community. It's that so much of this stuff, it's unique to us, but in the general sense, we all connect to it because we've all had our own version of some of these stories of buying experiences, whether it's someone buying their first Hamilton or somebody buying their first Patek Philippe watch. The emotions that run through an experience, we all feel them. Mm-hmm. So when I watch these videos, when I watch these interviews, whether it be Alton Brown's story or Gary, you get an insight into the more human side of a celebrity that you don't get to see. And they're just nerding out about something that you nerd out about, and you don't necessarily have people around you in your house that work at HODINKEE that you can just talk to about watches all day, but at least you can listen to them doing it. Luckily, I now get to go to the office and do that. But when I'm home here at my parents' house, by the way, I'm at my parents' house, I don't get to do that so often. So when you watch these videos, you get to sort of, nerd out through them. And I think it's an awesome feeling. And these talking watches have just been great to sort of do that for, I think, the community at large.